Right. Just to grab us a start on this macroeconomics, we had basically discussed prior to what we are going to be doing today that our economy can basically be separated into two, which is the goods market and the financial market. So regarding the goods market, we dealt with, I don't know if you would remember that graph, but we basically had the Z curve, right? And then we're basically looking at stuff like the marginal propensity to consume, marginal propensity to save. We also went on to look at the multiplier effect. So we're basically looking at the goods market in isolation, right? So what the effect would be, maybe what would the government do perhaps if they want to push the economy, and we're basically looking at the goods market in that regard. So what policies can they come up with there? So we spoke about the fiscal policy in terms of the expansionary fiscal policy as well as the contractionary fiscal policy, which is basically a way in which the government can want to influence whether they would want to influence, I mean, for the most part, whether they would want to increase the output. So that output in is within the ambit of the South African Reserve Bank, right? They are responsible for the policies that affect the financial market, right? And then for the most part, what they will be doing is varying the interest rate. So what they do there, their monetary policy, in the same way, it can be expansionary or contractionary. And when they are doing so, they are basically playing around with the interest rate, either increasing it or decreasing it. So I went on to talk about this in terms of what is happening currently. I think we mentioned that currently they have increased the interest rates, right? Increased the interest rates. And I did say that is an contractionary monetary policy, right? So we now go on to want to make that analysis now in terms of the IS and LM model. So we say the IS is the goods market. So what we are doing in terms of the goods market now, we are basically going to be putting on the y-axis the interest rate. So we want to assess the interest rates against the level of income, right? So both in the goods market and in the financial market. So we want to see what effect the interest rates have on that. So we do so by drawing the IS-LM curve. So when we started this, therefore, the last time we had this session, we were looking at how the IS curve is derived, right? So the IS curve is basically for the goods market, right? And then the LM, when you think of L here, you want to consider money, right? You want to consider money, the quantities of money. All right. So this is how it's gonna be derived. So I'm just gonna jump straight to that. But before we get there, since we are dealing with interest rates, right? In the goods market, we basically covered what happens to the level of income when investment expenditure is varied, right? For example, when investment expenditure increases, we saw that the level of the equilibrium income, the GDP, real GDP goes up, right? But now, what relationship does the interest rates have with the investment spending, right? So we examined that then. We saw that there is a negative relationship. So where does that come from? So every time you increase your interest rates, what happens to investments? They go down, right? For the simple reason that if you're going to be looking at investments in an economy, investments are not going to be directly related. I mean, to a very large extent, they are not going to be directly related, right, in a direct manner related to the level of incomes. So if you want to invest, in other words, if you want to, let's say if you want to buy a house, that's going to be pretty much unrelated to a very big extent with, let's say let me not say a house, let's say you want to buy a property and you're an organization, say you want to buy a block of flats. So for the most part, that's not going to be related to the level of income that you are currently making. So it's not like if you make more, this is to a great extent. If you make more, you are basically going to invest more, right? It's not exactly the case, because you bear in mind that for you to make such an investment, you will probably go to the bank and get a loan, you see. So hence, to a very large extent, such investments are related with the level of interest rates. So when the level of interest rates are high, it means you're going to be paying high interest for your loan investment. So in that case, you'll therefore have a lower investment, right? You're going to have a lower investment there. And then when the interest rates are very low, it simply means that you're going to be paying low interest rates. So, or low interest payments, you're making low interest payments. So under those circumstances, then you are being motivated to go and borrow more from the bank. So hence, there's basically that negative relationship there with the interest rates, right? So we need to keep that in mind, because that is the basis from which we are coming from here, right? And then there is the minor effect again, which I said, we are not going to overlook that, right? We are not going to jump that, but the relationship generally between investment spending and your Y, and remember our symbol Y here talks about income, right? And our real income for that matter, which is our GDP. So there is a positive relationship now between the GDP and investment spending. So to the extent that if companies are making profits, right, which is incomes in this instance, when the incomes are going okay, it's likely that companies are going to want to expand operations, because there are good times, they are going through good times. So that's why we have that positive relationship there. So in deriving the IS curve, we keep that in mind now, that, okay, there's a positive relationship between your income, and there's a positive between your income and your investment spending, while there's a negative relationship between your investment spending and your interest rates. So that can already give you in mind a picture of how that curve is basically gonna look like. So the symbols are given there. If you look at that symbol for Y, you can see as Y is going up, your investment spending is going up, and then as your Y is going down, your investment spending is also gonna be going down there. And then again, to sum that up there, your investment is basically a function of, so when we say it's a function of, we are basically saying it's influenced by your income in a positive manner and your interest rates in a negative manner. So in the way in which we're explaining that. So when we are doing the graph now, let's start with this in mind, the relationship between investment spending and your interest rates there. There is a negative relationship, so we can see that in the way in which that graph is structured, right? In the way in which that graph is moving, it's basically moving in a negative direction. So it's going down from the left to the right. So that's an inverse relationship there that's given. But to put it simple now, given that the relationship between, so your investment there is on the y-axis, so it's on the x-axis, which is the horizontal line there. So given now that your relationship between your interest rates and your investment spending is negative, and then also given that the relationship between the investment spending and your income, which is your Y, is positive, then you can pretty much deduce now from that there how this graph is going to look like there. So if you go down to fig C there, that basically gives you the relationship between the interest rates and Y there. So how that is derived, basically, we look at what happens when, right, you basically look at what happens when your interest rates are varied there on the first diagram, which is figure A. So that on the goods market, right, on figure B, on the ZZ curve, right, we can see that whenever the interest rates were changed and then the investment spending went down, the result there was a downward shift on that curve. So we can see when that curve goes down, what happens to your Y, your Y also reduces from Y to Y1. So you can pretty much plot those there on Fig C, right? So you can see that when your interest rates move up from I0 to I1, what happened to your Y? Your Y reduced. So that's the negative relationship there that you see. So that's all there on the IS curve. So you can, this gives you an explanation of what you expect to see in the market when the interest rates go up. What effect do you have? What effect would you expect to have there on your GDP? So I mentioned now that, so we are looking at the effects of this where on the goods market, right? The effects of a change in interest rates on the goods market. So we're looking at what happens now in the, what happens now with under the influence of the Reserve Bank, right, which is the changes in the interest rates. How does that affect the goods market? So this is what we are looking at there. So in the instance that we are dealing with now, currently we said the interest rates have in fact gone up. So what do we expect to have happened now to the demand? So that's there on Fig B. That graph there is consumption, right? Or let me just say it's expenditure. It's an expenditure graph, right? Which would include consumption, which would include investment expenditure. So what happens to investment? So we see that that investment has gone down now, the investment expenditure. So which means we can basically now conclude that with what the Reserve Bank did currently, this is what happened in the goods market. The investment spending is expected to have gone down. So if you wanted to go and get a loan, you probably didn't go, right? Because you thought it was going to be expensive for you to make those repayments there. All right, so that's the relationship there, and that's given. All right, so let's see now if this is the right time to talk about the shifts in that graph. Or all right, let's look at, very good, the shifts now on that curve. So when we look at the shifts on any curve in economics, we are looking at other circumstances that affect the issue that is being discussed there, which are outside of the model, right? Which are outside of the model. So any impact that's there on the goods market, which is not related to the income, which is again not related to the interest rates. So any of those there. So there are not many of them. It's basically the fiscal policy, right? The fiscal policy there for the most part. The fiscal policy is what's going to have a very, is what's going to be, is what we're going to be tested on for the most part. All right. So what happens now? So the fiscal policy, what's the fiscal policy? The fiscal policy, we are basically looking at, right, we are basically looking at, all right, let me just respond to Kesani. All right. We are basically looking at government spending and taxation, right? The policies that relate to government spending and taxation. What are we spending on? How much are we spending on? Whom are we taxing? And how much are we taxing that certain group of people? You know, the tax is not exactly uniform, right? Different people pay different taxes, different corporations pay different taxes, right? So the policies now that have got to do with that are the fiscal policy. So fiscal policy is basically, as we saw that in the goods market, in the ZZ curve, it basically causes a shift, right, on that graph. Again, it can either go up or go down, and it has an effect on the Y at the end of the day. So what happens now when there's an increase in taxation? Let's look at the chain of events there. Right, so when your taxation goes up, what happens to your disposable income? Your disposable income goes down. So YD is disposable income there. And then what happens to your consumption? Consumption spending goes down, and then the Z curve is going to go down, and then your Y is going to go down. So bear in mind that when taxation changes, the interest rates stay the same. So which means at the end of the day, you are either going to have a higher or a lower level of income with the given interest rate. So that's going to be the same as a shift in that graph there. That's what you are looking at. And then the top one there is the government expenditure. So you just need to know now the chain of events there that are given. So the government spending given there as G. So when your government spending goes up, your Z goes up. So what happens to your Y? Your Y goes up. So you're looking at the relationship between your G and your Y specifically there. So that's going to determine where your graph is going, right? I don't know if I'm, can you guys hear me? Lusanda, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so I think Hope should connect her audio. Please connect audio. Right, I think she should just connect the audio there. So in determining now where the shift is going to go, you look at the first and the last letter there. So if G is going up and then your Y is going up, then which means there's an increase in Y. So when your Y increases there, it's going to be a rightward shift in that curve. So which means when your G goes down, your Y goes down. So it should be a leftward shift in that circumstance. So your taxation has the opposite effect. So when your taxation goes up, what happens to your income? At the end of the day, your income goes down. So that's going to be a leftward shift there, right? And then when it goes down, right, when your taxation goes down, then you would expect that your level of income at the end of the day is going to go up. So those all right, I'm terribly sorry about that. Okay, so if you look at that now, the shift from IS1 to IS2 there, in terms of the fiscal policy. Now, if you look at what happens now when, say, there's an increase in taxation. So the increase in taxation, you would expect the shift to be to the left. So it's going to be from IS2 to IS1. Then if there's a decrease in taxation, it's going to be IS1 to IS2. If you look at government spending, if your government spending increases, then it's going to be IS1 to IS2. And then if it goes down, it's IS2 to IS1, right? So let's look at the movements there summarized on that graph, but I'm just going to talk about maybe a few more that are not included there. Okay, so an upward interest rate increase. So the increase, the rightward shift, so the increase in autonomous consumption spending because of, say, an increase in consumer confidence. Okay, I wanted to talk about consumer confidence, investor confidence, good that they've spoken about that, right? So those are other shifts there other than the ones that we spoke about, which is the fiscal policy. So if, for instance, consumer spending goes up for some reason, I think if you guys remember back in 2017 when President Cyril Ramaphosa got into power, people were so excited, people's expectations were so positive, right? So the likely effect of that could have been that consumption spending goes up, right? That was very likely to happen, consumption spending going up, because people are expecting good things to come their way. So our consumer confidence is up, right? We're expecting that there's going to be this huge shift in the economy, this good shift in the economy. So because of those expectations, there's therefore going to be a rightward shift there. So notice that we are talking about this where there is no change in the interest rate. The Reserve Bank has not made any changes in the interest rates, but our consumption is now more, right? Because we have better confidence now in the system, in the government, in the governing party. So that will be the opposite effect there when people, I mean, like what it is now, people's hopes are low. So their consumption is also low in that regard. So the same applies with investor confidence. I mean, round about that period, investors were excited. So we assume that in investor expenditure should have gone up during that time, right? Both, foreign investment and domestic investment. So that could have been the reason. So anything that would basically cause an increase in our GDP that has got nothing to do with the interest rate is going to be reflected on the as a shift there on that curve. All right, so typically the questions are going to ask you, I think we had some of these questions in the assignment, say, what could have caused a movement there from, say, A to C? So you're looking at a shift, right? So it's got nothing to do with the interest rates. A to D again, it's got nothing to do with the interest rates, right? Because it's on a different graph altogether. B to D, it's got nothing to do with interest rates. It's on a different graph. So you're looking at either fiscal policy, investor confidence, and consumer confidence. Those are the things that you're looking at there. But a movement from A to B is definitely going to be caused by the interest rates. C to D is going to be caused by the interest rates there. All right, so in summary, that's what you have there. All right, that's what you basically have there. So now let's introduce the financial markets. Right, let's look at the financial market. So before attempting this section, make sure you understand the following: the demand for money and how the interest rate is determined. Right, the demand for money and how the interest rate is determined. So this is something that we already covered now in previous sections. Right, so I think when we look at the interest rates here, okay, I will mention this without having to go into big detail. Let's start with the demand for money. So the demand for money, we're looking at what relationship does money have with the interest rates? What relationship does money have with the interest rates? So now we are centered on the interest rates because we are doing the ISLM, so which has the interest rates, and that Y, which is on the horizontal, right? So we'll be interested in what happens to money, right? What happens to money when interest rates are varied, and then what happens to money, or what happens to your income when money is varied, right? To your GDP, in other words, when we talk of income here, we are not referring to your salary, right? We're talking about the GDP, the real income in the economy. What happens there? So we observed a negative relationship. Let's see if it's summed up there. Okay, it's not given there. It's fine, right? So I'll just sum it up for us. So we observed a negative relationship between money and interest rates, right? Between money and interest rates. And we said whenever the interest rates are high, what happens to people's demand for money? People's demands for money is low. And then I further explained that when we talk of the demand for money here, we are referring to money as an asset, not about you wanting a salary increase or you wanting more money in your bank account. No, we are talking about you keeping money as an asset. So you already are someone that is wealthy. Okay. So you can either, I think I gave this example in the previous session, we said you can either keep your money in the form of bonds. We are assuming two types of assets here. You can either keep your money in the form of bonds, which pay an interest, right? Or you can keep your money in your mattress, which basically doesn't give you an interest. You see? So which means, so if there are circumstances that are causing you to shy away from the bond market and take your money into your wardrobe, into your furniture, then we are saying your demand for money is high under those circumstances. Then if you are rather now taking your money from your mattress and you are investing in the bond market, then that's basically gonna be reflected there as a reduction in your demand for money. So now you are either demanding bonds or demanding money. So when you're not demanding money, we say you are demanding bonds. You see. So what are bonds? Bonds, you basically have an agreement where you give either the government or maybe corporations money, and then they are paying you a fixed return, and then they later give you back the amount that you gave them. That's what we are talking about. Okay. So first of all, now we establish that negative relationship between money and the interest rate. But what's the relationship now between money and GDP? Right. So the relationship is going to be going through, or it's going to be going via, I think in the previous section, we identified three motives for keeping money, which are three motives for demanding money. Right? We said it can either be precautionary, speculative or transactional. So speculative, right? The speculative one is the one that's related with the interest rates, the one that I just described now. Then the transactional one now is related with the income levels. So how so? There's a positive relationship there. So when the income levels are high, demand for money for transactional purposes is also high. So it's like you, suppose when your income goes up, what happens to your transactions? The level of transactions are going to increase, right? So we expect that you are going to be demanding quite a lot of money for your transactions, which is meeting up the day-to-day needs, monetary needs. Okay. So now we establish that negative relationship between interest rates and money demanded, and then a positive relationship between level of income and money. All right. So now let's go to how we are going to derive that. Okay, so something important now. Let's first talk about the traditional way of deriving the LM curve. So this results in an upward sloping LM curve. So the key to this derivation is the events that take place in the financial market when the level of output and income changes. So let's just talk about that, though we are not going to do that. So what happens is when the interest rates go up, right? When the interest rates go up, right? What happens to, let's say, all right, when the interest rates have gone up, we have already observed that whenever the interest rates, I think from the previous, okay, excuse me, right? What happens when the interest rates go up? Okay, when the interest rates go up, we expect that now we are talking about this in the money market, right? The interest rates go up as a result of excess money in the market. So the interest rates, usually when the interest rates are up, they're going to be corresponding with a high level of money, right? In other words, there's going to be a high level of M there. So particularly when you're going to be looking at this in terms of Y and if you're going to be looking at this in terms of the relationship between Y and your M, right? That positive relationship. So when your Y is up, what happens to your M? Your M is going to be what? Your M is going to be up. Okay. But what's the corresponding right there? For the financial market to be kept in balance, it means that the interest rates are going to be high under those circumstances. So in other words, usually the Reserve Bank responds in that manner. So whenever your Y is up and your money, your transactions are high, they want to tone down the economy. So which means the interest rates have to be up at that point, right? And then the opposite of that. So that's the traditional. So when the level of output of income, demand for money increases, leading to an increase in the interest rate. So this is what we are talking about there. But let's bear this in mind now. We will move away from the traditional way of deriving the LM curve. Nowadays, the central bank focuses directly on the interest rate. So the central bank basically chooses the interest rate, which is I, which affects the cost of credit and loans, which therefore affects the demand for money and the quantity of money.
Hi, sir. I can't see the screen. Is it only me or it's my network?
I can see from my side.
Oh, I think it's on your side then. Right, but we are almost done now. We are almost done. But you will check the recording, right? So the LM curve is therefore simply derived as, or simply put across as that straight horizontal line. So which means basically we choose the interest rate that suits us as the Reserve Bank. So the South African Reserve Bank directly targets the interest rate. So they say, like what's happening now, they say the interest rate is gonna be 15, then they simply pick it up, they say it's 15, etc. That's what happens there. So it can either go up or go down. So when it goes up, they've simply decided to put the interest rates up. When it goes down, they've simply decided to put the interest rates down there. So that again, as you remember, that's on the monetary policy there. All right, what questions do you have on this? What questions do you have? So next up now, we are going to be looking at, now we've looked at the IS curve and the LM curve and the reasons for the shifts there. So what we're going to be looking at after now is effects of these shifts. Well, now that we are not looking at it in isolation, we're going to be combining now the goods market and the financial market in this whole ISLM model. Then we see what happens to what we expect to see when there's a change in fiscal policy, investor confidence or consumer confidence, or what happens when there's a contractionary monetary policy effects that we expect to see there. So we are basically going to be putting those graphs together. Then we see the effects on that. But what questions do we have? What questions do we have before we conclude? All right, so take your time to go through the recording and then just check the study guide. If you have any questions, just send them through there to the group. But this is a very, very, very easy module. All right.